You will become what you pay attention to. Cal Newport's Deep Work is not just a book about productivity. It's a profound treatise on the irreplaceable value of deep focus in an era that erodes it by the hour. Newport doesn't speak to us with the voice of a tech evangelist or a casual self-help guru. He observes, analyzes, and presents a razor-sharp argument. If you learn to isolate yourself from distractions, you won't just work more efficiently, you'll transform the very nature of that work. But what truly happens when someone commits to living and working in a deep work mode amidst a world that devours time with notifications, emails, and fragmented conversations? Can we rewire our brains to resist this relentless current, or will we be swept away before we even begin? We encourage listeners to buy and read the book to fully grasp its content, because only by reading the entire book will you truly understand the issues I'm about to discuss. For now, let's begin with me. Here's a summary of the book. Chapter 1, Work is Valuable. I've lived through all kinds of work environments. From early days drowning in endless meetings with an incessantly ringing inbox to those rare moments when I'd lock my office door, cut off all connection to the world, and immerse myself deeply in a problem. I can tell you plainly, the difference between those two states is so vast it's almost like living two different lives. And it's from that experience that I realized a truth I want you to understand. Deep work isn't just a productivity method. It's a critical, even existential, competitive advantage. We live in an economy where everything revolves around ideas, information, and creative capacity. Here, the winners are those who can learn at lightning speed while simultaneously producing solutions or products that far surpass the majority. And deep work is the engine that makes both of these things happen concurrently. You cannot learn a complex skill when your mind is fragmented by messages, notifications, or interrupted conversations, just as you cannot generate a groundbreaking idea while constantly being pulled out of your train of thought. Nate Silver, the data journalist known across America for his accurate election predictions, works this way. He sits for hours in front of a screen, burying himself in massive data tables, refining forecasting models bit by bit. That's the kind of work where even a single interrupting message can shatter the entire flow of thought. Yet, it was precisely his ability to protect that state of focus that led to predictions that captured the world's attention. Deep work isn't just an abstract concept. Neuroscience shows that when we immerse ourselves in this state, the brain enters a special mode of operation called flow. Have you ever felt time fly by when you were doing something challenging yet engaging? That's it. In flow, neural connections strengthen, new knowledge is firmly anchored, and ideas spring forth like a flowing stream. I've emerged from that state countless times, realizing I'd completed a week's worth of work in just a few hours. But the true value of deep work doesn't stop at productivity. It protects you from an insidious undertow, the replacement of machines, artificial intelligence, algorithms, and automation quietly taking away repetitive, predictable jobs. Only tasks demanding deep thought, unique creativity, and the subtle connection between knowledge domains, the very things deep work nurtures, remain beyond the reach of machines. I'm not saying this to scare you, but to make it unequivocally clear. Mastering deep work is how you secure your place in the future. Deep work isn't an innate talent, it's a skill. I've practiced it, failed at it, and then found ways to protect it like guarding a fortress. The best programmers I know have morning rituals that are almost ceremonial. They walk into their offices, close the door, shut off the internet, and write code in absolute silence. Writers I've spoken with have set aside an entire summer to stay in a secluded house, isolated from society, just to write. That's not asceticism. It's the only way to create something no one else can. Deep work shortens the path to mastery. When you focus all your energy on a new skill, your brain builds and strengthens neural connections at an unparalleled speed. And I say this with the certainty of someone who has read hundreds of studies, experimented on myself and on my students. There are no shortcuts. Every trick or multitasking secret is an illusion. To reach the pinnacle, you must pour your entire mind into what you're doing, hour by hour, day by day. I want you to feel the weight of this choice. Deep work isn't something you simply try out. It's a commitment to a way of life, a strategy to place you at the highest tier, where creativity, achievement, and a sustainable career are no longer matters of chance, but the inevitable outcome of a disciplined existence. A top programmer, whose code formed the backbone of a platform used by millions, once told me that to solve a complex problem, he needed at least 3 continuous hours, no phone rings, no emails, no colleague dropping by to ask for just a minute. Even a single interruption meant he'd lose at least half an hour trying to get back into his old rhythm of thought. And sometimes, a nascent idea would vanish forever. I understand that deeply because I too have lost golden moments just because a notification flashed on my screen. This isn't just a personal feeling. Science has measured the cost of interruption. Each time you're disrupted, your brain has to switch states, and returning to the original state consumes more energy than we realize. It's like an athlete who's just reached top speed is forced to stop mid-race and then has to restart from zero. Deep work eliminates that waste, turning every minute into true, unfettered intellectual capital. On my journey to cultivate deep work, I learned that it doesn't just depend on willpower, but also on environment and ritual. Human willpower is finite. If you place yourself in a space where temptations are always in plain sight, you will lose. So, I and many others have learned to design environments to serve deep work: minimalist desks, external devices turned off, quiet spaces, clear schedules. Some call it asceticism for intellectual labor. But I see it simply as respect for one's work. How does deep work transform people? A friend of mine, a product designer, used to struggle constantly, always chasing deadlines. His mind was full of fragmented ideas, but he couldn't turn them into complete products. He decided to try deep work. Every morning, before opening his email, he dedicated 3 continuous hours to the most critical design phase. After just a few months, the quality and speed of his work dramatically changed. Clients weren't just more satisfied, they were willing to pay significantly more for his projects. Deep work isn't always comfortable. It demands that you confront difficulty and even boredom. In the initial hours, you'll feel the urge to check your phone, open a new tab, or find something easier to do. But if you push past that stage, the reward is a profound sense of mastery over your time and your mind, a rare feeling in this world. The era we live in is not short of busy people. What's rare are those who generate significant value from their time. Deep work is the path to that. And when I speak of value, I'm not just talking about money or fame. I'm talking about the quiet confidence of knowing you're creating something meaningful, something that will endure longer than yourself. In your workday, what percentage of time are you truly immersed in your most important work? How much is spent running around, extinguishing small fires? If the answer leaves you feeling confused or guilty, that's a clear sign. It's time to make room for deep work. If you start taking deep work seriously today, you'll soon realize, as I have, that this isn't just a skill for success, it's a way of life. A silent declaration that you will not let the world dictate how you use your mind. I once compared deep work to a precious resource in nature, the concentrated energy of light when focused through a lens. Diffused light is barely enough to show the way. But when converged, it can burn. The human mind is similar. If you allow your thoughts to scatter, you'll only produce mediocre results. But if you gather them, focusing all your cognitive power on a single problem, you'll witness an explosive force. Many people believe they can still be effective in an environment full of interruptions. They trust in their ability to multitask, switching between emails, messages, spreadsheets, and project documents. I haven't just read enough research to know that's an illusion. I've experienced it. Each time you context switch, your brain leaves a portion of its energy with the old task. And when you return, you need to recharge your thought process. Repeat this hundreds of times a day, and you'll find yourself exhausted, yet no closer to your real goals. Deep work gives you a gift more valuable than mere productivity. It gives you time to truly live with yourself. When you work deeply, you're no longer swept up by others' immediate demands or fake urgent notifications. You exist in a zone of quietude where you and your work confront each other completely. There, every decision, every action carries weight, and that is where you create lasting value. I saw this most clearly when observing scientific researchers. They would spend months just solving a single problem, sometimes without immediate results. But it was precisely that perseverance in a state of deep work that led them to industry-changing discoveries. There are no shortcuts. There are no flashes of genius while scrolling through social media. All of it is the fruit of thousands of hours of rigorous focus. An author I know lived a reclusive life in a small rural house. Every day, he dedicated only 3 hours to writing, but those 3 hours were sacrosanct. No one was allowed to call, no one was allowed to knock on his door. He said, "That is my time to meet myself." And over decades, it was those hours of deep work that produced books that resonated with millions. But deep work doesn't just happen. It demands that you fight against a deeply ingrained tendency, the constant need to feel busy. In this society, many people measure their worth by the number of emails they answer, the meetings they attend, or the tasks they check off their list. But these are false metrics. Busyness doesn't equate to value creation. You can be busy from morning till night, but if it's all shallow work, you're straying far from the path to true achievement. When I started taking deep work seriously, I had to learn to say no to many things, declining meaningless meetings, ignoring trivial conversations, closing time-wasting websites. Initially, I feared I'd miss out on something, but then I realized the only thing I was missing was the exhaustion and distraction I once considered normal. You'll be astonished by the volume of work you complete when you truly focus. Not because you're working faster, but because you're working deeper. Every idea is developed to its fullest, every problem solved at its root, and the results carry a weight that shallow work can never achieve. That is the true value of deep work. It transforms time into the highest-yielding investment you can make. I know some listeners will hear this and think, that all sounds great, but I can't dedicate continuous hours without interruption. My job simply doesn't allow it. I won't deny it. There are positions and work environments that seem to actively resist deep work. But if you treat that as an excuse to give up, you'll forever be trapped in the whirlpool of shallow work. The truth is, no matter the circumstances, you can find small pockets of time to focus deeply, and from there, gradually expand them. A team of tech company employees, constantly under pressure from meetings and continuous email processing, initially could only carve out 30 minutes a day for uninterrupted work. But by rescheduling meetings, turning off notifications, and agreeing with colleagues on their golden hours, they increased that to 2 hours. As a result, projects that once took weeks were shortened to just a few days. When you start working deeply, those around you will also recognize and respect that space. Like in a professional kitchen, everyone knows when the chef is focused. No one casually interrupts. The more strictly you guard your deep work, the more others will see it as a non-negotiable part of your schedule. And once you've tasted the fruits of deep work, you'll find it hard to go back to your old ways. I once tried, during periods when I was forced to handle work in an always-on style, for just a few weeks. I found myself becoming fatigued, my ideas shallow, and my productivity noticeably declining. Deep work, once it becomes a habit, will make you more discerning about how you spend your time. This is also why I consider deep work a form of intellectual capital, unlike money or opportunities. This intellectual capital cannot be taken away unless you abandon it yourself. Every hour of deep work is a time you recharge your capacity for learning, creativity, and problem-solving at a level that shallow work can never reach. The faster and noisier the world becomes, the slower and quieter deep work seems. And it's precisely that slowness that is the key to advancing faster in the long run. Like planting a tree, you cannot force it to grow overnight. But if you diligently nurture it, one day you will sit under its shade and realize you have surpassed those who constantly chase speed. I'm not telling you this to romanticize deep work. It's not the image of an artist sitting by a window, lost in the evening light. Deep work is real work that demands discipline and sometimes endurance. It's like digging a tunnel through a mountain slow, painstaking. But each pickaxe strike brings you closer to the other side. If you persevere, you'll find that deep work doesn't just change your work results. It changes you. You'll become more patient, less reactive to superficial stimuli, and more profound in every decision. And then one day, you'll look back and realize that the greatest value of deep work lies not in the achievements you attain, but in the person you've become on that journey. I want you to visualize the entire picture. A world where everyone races against time, responding in seconds, handling dozens of tasks simultaneously. But few truly create anything meaningful in that world. Deep work is like an isolated island that no one drifts to by chance. You have to row your boat there yourself, and once you set foot on the island, you realize it's fertile ground where ideas take deep root and grow into lasting structures. But to get there, you must give up certain things. You must accept that you cannot be present in every conversation, cannot know every piece of news instantly, cannot reply to everyone as soon as they call. You will lose a few things, but in return, you gain complete focus, something that multiplies the value of your work many times over. And that, in my opinion, is a fair trade. I've seen this in myself. The books I've written, the research I've completed, all originated from periods meticulously protected from outside intrusion. I've turned down many seemingly attractive opportunities simply to preserve my deep work time, and I've never regretted it. Deep work is also not separate from your personal life. When you learn to focus deeply, you'll also know how to disengage from work when the workday ends. You'll no longer carry a dozen fragmented thoughts about deadlines or unanswered emails to dinner. You'll be more present with your family, friends, and even with yourself. The clear separation between deep work and downtime makes both experiences more complete. If you ask me if deep work is the only asterisk path to success, I'd say no. There are certainly people who achieve great things through other means. But in this era, I believe deep work is the surest path, the least reliant on luck, and the one that grants you the most control over your destiny. I've shared this not to paint an ambiguous concept, but to give you a map. That map will lead you out of the shallow waters, where you're always busy but never progress far, and into the deep waters where every stroke propels you forward. You don't need to change everything in a single day. Start with small blocks of time, protect them from interruptions, and gradually expand. Over time, deep work will no longer be an activity you try to do, but an inherent part of who you are. And when that happens, you'll understand why I call deep work a precious superpower. Precious not just because it's rare, but because it can shape both your career and your life. It's not just how you work, it's how you live. Chapter 2. Deep work is rare. When I say deep work is valuable, you might think everyone would be scrambling to master it. But the reality is strikingly different. Deep work is not only difficult to practice, but also as rare as a near-extinct skill. And the reason it's rare isn't that people are unaware of it, but because modern society is structured in a way that pushes us further and further away from it. Just look at a typical workday in any company. Emails constantly popping up, internal messages never ceasing, meeting schedules so dense they encroach on lunch breaks. And even when sitting at their desk, people simultaneously have multiple browser windows open to catch up on news or indulge in a little entertainment. This environment is lauded as flexible, connected, and multitasking friendly. But in truth, it's making deep work virtually impossible. Many companies today operate on what I call the principle of surface collaboration. This means they prioritize constant presence and communication over actual output. In such environments, an employee is valued not for generating groundbreaking results, but for always responding to emails quickly, always being available when called, and attending most meetings. These behaviors create a sense of busyness but steal time for deep work. In such an environment, deep work becomes a luxury. No one grants you 4 continuous hours to solve a complex problem. You have to seize it, but most people don't, because they've been convinced that surface-level busyness is the true measure of success. I also see another factor contributing to the rarity of deep work: the explosion of technology and social media. Every notification is an invitation to leave your state of focus. And because our brains are naturally drawn to quick, small rewards, a like, a new message, many people never go more than a few minutes without checking their phone. This is a form of addiction, and like all addictions, it erodes the patience necessary for deep work. A young executive, managing a team of nearly 50 people, confessed that he couldn't remember the last time he focused for more than an hour. His calendar was packed with meetings, his phone was always by his side, and emails were checked dozens of times a day. He knew he was eroding his capacity for deep work, but felt trapped because that's how the company operated. And I know he's not an isolated case. The scarcity of deep work also stems from a harsh reality. Many people have never experienced it long enough to realize its value. They grew up and work in environments where distraction is the norm, so they see no reason to protect focused time. It's like never having tasted a truly exquisite meal. They can't crave it. Thus, Deep work exists like an untapped gold mine right beneath our feet, but most are busy digging in the sand on the surface. I write this chapter so you understand. Mastering deep work doesn't just make you better. It places you in a very small group of people capable of generating exceptional value. Its very rarity increases its worth. One of the reasons deep work is rare is because we've turned busyness into a social signal. I call it the busyness signal, a way to prove your worth by always appearing to be doing something. In many work environments, if you seem idle, others will think you're unimportant. But if you're constantly busy, they'll assume you're contributing a lot. So, instead of seeking efficiency, people seek opportunities to demonstrate busyness. Take a department where all employees keep email and internal chat apps open on their screens all day. They respond almost instantly to every message, even trivial ones. The result is that none of them can focus for more than 20 minutes. Yet, paradoxically, their boss considers this a sign of good work ethic. In such an environment, deep work is not only difficult, but also seen as behavior that deviates from company culture. Adding to this is another dangerous trend: the reverence for technology tools without considering long-term consequences. Many organizations adopt numerous communication, project management, and document sharing platforms with the goal of connection and optimization. But when everything is designed for anyone to reach you instantly, the ability for sustained focus erodes. People forget that each interruption doesn't just cost a few seconds to reply, but dozens of minutes to get back into their original train of thought. We also live in an era where breadth is prioritized over depth. Social media encourages you to be highly visible, share constantly, and respond quickly. It's a race for frequency, not quality. And if you let yourself be swept up in this rhythm, you'll always be in a state of energy dissipation, maintaining a superficial presence instead of channeling energy into tasks that demand focused intellect. A friend, a freelance designer, spent most of his day maintaining activity on social media, interacting with potential clients, answering messages, and posting experimental designs to stay current. But eventually, he realized he no longer had enough time to complete any major projects. When we analyzed it, it became clear that he had let the rarity of deep work steal his opportunity to create something truly distinctive. Deep work doesn't become rare because it's technically complex, but because it demands a choice that goes against the current. You have to accept stepping away from socially encouraged habits, the habit of always being connected, always responsive, always busy. It's a countercultural decision, and not everyone has the courage to make it. If you start protecting your deep work time, you'll find yourself misunderstood. Some will think you're lazy for not attending every meeting or aloof for responding to messages slowly. But this very difference will become a shield, protecting you from being diluted into the crowd. You cannot expect to achieve different results if you behave just like the majority. To understand why deep work is so scarce, I want you to imagine a room full of keyboard clatter, notification pings, and overlapping conversations. That's not just physical noise. It's the manifestation of a work environment designed to prioritize response speed and visibility over depth. I once visited a fast-growing tech startup. Their office was open plan, with no walls or private spaces. Everyone sat close together to foster interaction. But what I observed wasn't creative collaboration. It was a relentless stream of small questions, instant exchanges, and constant glances at others' screens. In such an environment, for someone to sit silently, focusing on a single problem for hours on end, was virtually impossible. This is a vivid example of what I call the cult of accessibility. In many organizations, the more accessible you are, the quicker you answer questions, the more frequently you're available for impromptu meetings, the higher you're valued. But the price you pay is never having enough time to delve deeply into anything. And gradually, you lose the capacity needed for deep work, just as muscles atrophy without exercise. Modern technology exacerbates the situation. Smartphones and chat platforms turn you into a mobile communication hub, ready to receive and send information anytime, anywhere. And because humans are naturally prone to quick rewards, you get caught in a loop. Whenever your brain feels fatigued by a difficult task, you seek out a new notification like a short-term stimulant. Over time, you inadvertently train yourself to avoid sustained intellectual effort. I've witnessed this even in highly talented individuals. A journalist I know had brilliant political analysis capabilities, but she spent most of her time monitoring Twitter, replying to comments, and posting quick opinions. These activities brought immediate attention, but they stole the quiet afternoons she once used to write profound analyses. Gradually, her work became thinner, lacking the weight it once had. Therefore, I want you to clearly see that deep work isn't rare simply because society doesn't encourage it. It's rare because we've built an entire system from office design and communication habits to personal technology to actively work against it. And when all these factors combine, the result is an environment where long-term focus is not just difficult, but almost counter to our rewired instincts. This is also why, if you can maintain deep work in this world, you possess what is almost a superpower. Not because you're smarter, but because you're swimming against the current. While the majority are swept away by the flow, the more you sustain this ability, the more you distinguish yourself from the mediocrity caused by distraction. The consequence of deep work becoming rare doesn't stop at individual productivity. It also reshapes the entire competitive landscape in the knowledge economy. When most people are swept up in shallow work, those who can maintain deep focus naturally stand out. They are almost without competition at the same level. Consider a group of top software engineers in a major tech corporation. This group clearly divided into two types of people: those who always responded quickly, attended every meeting, handled a barrage of small requests, and those who spent most of their time in deep work sessions, rarely interrupted. The results were astounding. The second group, despite appearing less busy, produced technical solutions with far greater long-term impact. When the company encountered complex problems that needed solving, they were the ones sought out. This is the competitive advantage of deep work. It allows you to tackle problems that others lack the patience or capacity to even approach. And in an increasingly complex world, these kinds of problems are the most crucial. I also observe this in academia. There are researchers who spend most of their time chasing conferences, participating in collaborative projects to gain visibility. They appear everywhere. But when you look at their actual work, groundbreaking contributions are rare. Conversely, those who rigorously protect their deep work time, sometimes professors whom students rarely encounter outside of class, are the ones who publish findings that change entire fields of study. Modern society often doesn't immediately reward deep work. Its rewards typically come later. Meanwhile, shallow work gives you a sense of instant accomplishment, an empty inbox, a rapidly shrinking to-do list, a surge in social media likes. But if you chase these quick rewards, you're trading your future for the present. Deep work demands that you believe in the value of long-term results, even when they haven't yet materialized. A friend of mine, an architect, once told me he spent almost a year just researching and designing a public building. During that entire time, he didn't take on quick commercial projects for money, nor did he post anything on professional social media. Many colleagues thought he'd disappeared. But when the building was completed and won an international award, all the gossip vanished, replaced by awe. He proved that deep work, though rare, is the path to creating timeless landmarks. And this is what you need to engrave in your mind. The very scarcity of deep work makes it invaluable. If everyone could sustain it, it would no longer be an advantage. But because the majority are caught in the orbit of distraction, merely by maintaining deep focus, you put yourself at an almost insurmountable distance ahead of them. If deep work is so valuable, why don't we treat it as a mandatory standard? The answer, I believe, lies in the fact that it demands a level of discipline and conscious choice that most people aren't willing to undertake. It's far easier to blend into the noisy rhythm of life, where small, continuous achievements give you the feeling of moving forward. It's much harder to accept stepping out of that current to patiently build something that might take months or even years to yield results. This is like comparing someone who runs short sprints for immediate applause with a silent marathon runner in training. The first gets immediate attention, while the second seems to disappear. But when race day comes, only the second has the stamina to complete the course. Deep work is similar. It doesn't give you instant rewards, but when big opportunities arise, it places you in a position very few others can reach. Another consequence of this scarcity is that deep work becomes a natural filter. Those who can sustain it automatically filter out competitors who cannot. This isn't because they are selfish or want to isolate themselves, but simply because of the demands of deep work itself. They must carefully select what they engage with, rejecting the rest. This is a strategic choice, not social alienation. A talented programmer once turned down a job offer from a renowned company simply because its work schedule didn't allow him long, deep work sessions. He knew clearly that if he had to spend most of his time in meetings and handling immediate crises, he would lose his ability to create complex solutions, which was his core strength. That decision surprised many. But a few years later, when he launched a groundbreaking software product and founded his own company, everyone understood why. The rarity of deep work also changes how you perceive the value of time. Once you've experienced the feeling of being absorbed in a problem, forgetting everything around you, and then emerging with a truly meaningful result, you'll begin to clearly see the terrible waste of hours spent on shallow activities. It's not just a waste of productivity, but an erosion of intellect and patience. Deep work is a capacity that doesn't come naturally, and once lost, it's very difficult to regain. In a world where most people are gradually losing this ability, anyone who retains it will possess an advantage that cannot be quickly replicated in their current life. Is deep work an obvious part of your life, or merely a distant concept you've never truly experienced? Your answer will determine whether you belong to the majority or to the small group of people who can shape their own future through the depth they pour into their work. Chapter 3. Work is meaningful. I've told you that deep work is valuable and that it's rare. But there's one more reason I believe you should place it at the center of your life. Deep work brings meaning. And meaning isn't something you can buy or receive through fleeting praise. It emerges when you pour your entire mind into a difficult task, overcome obstacles, and stand before a result that even you must admit you did well. Modern people often speak of seeking meaning as if it's a distant journey, tied to grand decisions like quitting a job, traveling the world, or engaging in charity work. But there's a truth few realize. Meaning often lies right within those hours when you are completely focused on a valuable task. Not because the task itself is noble by societal standards, but because you've poured your entire being into it. A violin maker in Italy I once met spent his entire life crafting just a few hundred instruments. Each violin took months, from selecting the wood, cutting and shaping, to assembling and fine-tuning the sound. He worked in a small workshop, its window facing a quiet street. And when I asked him if he found the work boring, he looked at me and smiled, saying, "How could it be boring when each violin is a part of my life?" That is the spirit of craftsmanship, the spirit of those who see every product they create as a personal statement. They don't need to go out into the world to find meaning, because meaning already resides in every hour of their deep work. Modern psychology calls this experience flow, a state where you are completely absorbed in your work, losing track of time, even of yourself, with only the task at hand remaining. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who deeply researched this phenomenon, discovered that people are happiest not when resting or recreating, but when they are engaged in an activity that is just challenging enough to push them, but not so difficult as to be impossible. And deep work is the ideal condition to create flow. If you've ever experienced such a work session, you'll understand this feeling so clearly that no one needs to explain it. You start the workday with a challenge, feeling like you're struggling to piece things together. Then suddenly, everything clicks. You see the path forward, and when you look up, hours have passed. At that point, the result is merely a bonus. The greatest reward is the process you've just experienced. In today's superficial society, we're led to believe that meaning comes from being noticed. A photo with thousands of likes, a wildly viral post. These things might make you feel validated, but they rarely leave a deep satisfaction. Deep work is different. It doesn't need an audience, and its value doesn't depend on external validation. It's a dialogue between you and your work, a dialogue that can redefine how you see yourself. The art of craftsmanship isn't just about creating a perfect product, it's the process of self-shaping through your work. When you enter deep work, you're doing more than completing a task. You're cultivating patience, discipline, the ability to focus, and a profound respect for what you're doing. The sculptor August Rodin once advised a student, "Don't think about fame, just carve, and carve more. Love your work to the point of forgetting yourself." This isn't just advice on a craft, It's a philosophy of life. Deep work gives you the chance to enter that state where you're no longer distracted by ego or the gaze of others, but only by you and what you are creating. And it is this that makes deep work meaningful. It pulls you out of the constant self-awareness spiral that modern society imposes. In a world that constantly demands you compare yourself to others, deep work is a sanctuary where you can fully dedicate yourself to something that only you can shape. The connection between deep work and meaning is further reinforced by an interesting discovery in psychology. People value what they invest significant effort into. Psychologist Dan Ariely calls this the IKEA effect. When you put effort into assembling a piece of furniture, you tend to cherish it more. Deep work operates on a larger scale. When you spend hours, days, months solving a difficult problem, you don't just create a result. You build a part of your identity around that result. Think of a programmer who dedicates an entire summer to developing complex software. When it's complete, that product isn't just a tool, it's a testament to his capabilities, to the time and passion he poured into it. And every time he looks at it, he sees himself in it. This is a form of meaning that no shallow activity can provide, because shallow work doesn't demand you invest so much of yourself. Deep work also brings another kind of joy, the joy of measurable progress. When you work deeply, you see yourself getting better at a specific skill. This improvement, however small, creates a sense of control and growth. And as studies on happiness have shown, the feeling of progress is one of the most crucial factors in sustaining motivation and life satisfaction. Conversely, shallow work, with its fragmented and interrupted nature, rarely gives you a clear sense of progress. You're busy all day, but by the end, it's hard to pinpoint how you've actually improved in any specific area. Deep work is different. Every hour you invest in it leaves a clear mark on your skills and understanding. The more conveniences we have, the easier access to information and entertainment, the more prone we are to a sense of emptiness. Hours spent scrolling social media, consuming news, or continuous entertainment can fill your calendar but leave your mind hollow when the screen turns off. That's a void many try to fill with even more noise instead of confronting it. Deep work offers a complete opposite. It creates an ordered flow where every thought and action is tightly linked to a single goal. When you immerse yourself in this state, the feeling of vagueness and scatteredness is replaced by a clear direction. Every hour that passes leaves a trace. And you can look back and see that you've moved another step towards what you desire. A researcher I once spoke with described it perfectly. When I do deep work, I feel like I'm stitching each thread into a large tapestry. Each thread might be small, but over time, the tapestry appears before my eyes, and I know I'm creating something meaningful. This comparison is not only beautiful but psychologically accurate. Deep work creates a sense of connection between life's moments, turning them into a coherent story rather than a series of disjointed events. It is precisely because of this that deep work becomes an antidote to the modern malaise of uncertainty, the state of not knowing what one is doing with their life or what meaning their work holds. Many suffer from this because they don't spend enough time deeply engaging with anything, as every task is interrupted. You can't feel the weight of accomplishment, and that makes everything feel bland. A high school math teacher, who rediscovered his passion for the profession after he started dedicating time each day to creating advanced problem sets for his students. Initially, he only intended to challenge a few gifted students, but then the process of researching, experimenting, and refining the assignments drew him into an unprecedented state of deep work. He said that for the first time in years, he felt every one of his lessons truly mattered, because he knew each problem was the result of hours of serious focus and thought. This is one of the greatest gifts deep work can give you. It transforms work into a part of your identity, rather than just a means to an end. And when work becomes a part of who you are, it doesn't just nourish you materially, but also enriches your spiritual life. A Japanese artisan specializing in kitchen knives, who spent his entire life perfecting a single blade type. His workshop was in a small alley, with no sign, no advertising. Customers had to seek him out, sometimes waiting months to make a purchase. When asked why he didn't expand production or hire more apprentices, he simply replied, "Each blade needs time for me to understand what it wants to become." That answer made me reflect deeply. Deep work isn't just about creating a good product. It's also about how you approach life with patience, respect, and dedication to every detail. It is this process that nurtures a kind of meaning you cannot find in work that is merely done for now. In a world of tight deadlines and projects that exist solely to meet KPIs, dedicating hours each day to something that demands absolute attention is an act of defiance against superficiality. It's an affirmation that some things are worth slowing down for and investing your whole self in. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow also points out another crucial aspect. When you are in a state of high concentration, the brain significantly reduces activity in areas related to anxiety and self-doubt. In other words, deep work not only helps you create value, it also frees you from pervasive negative thoughts. You enter a mental space where only the task and your capabilities meet. There's no room for the noise of anxiety. When writing a difficult book chapter, I initially kept doubting myself. Is this idea strong enough? Will anyone care? But after a few hours of immersing myself in the writing flow, those questions vanished. When I typed the final period, I realized I had spent an entire afternoon without being pulled away from the task even once. And that very afternoon became one of the most important parts of the book. Deep work also creates a ripple effect. When you see one area of your life become more meaningful thanks to deep focus, you start looking for ways to apply that to other areas. A programmer might begin deep work on a software project, but then apply the same spirit to learning music or improving their health. Gradually, your life is restructured around activities that nourish meaning instead of eroding it. I believe that deep down, everyone craves the feeling of doing something meaningful. But modern society, with its myriad tools and distracting habits, has blurred the connection between our actions and that feeling. We are busy but rarely fully engaged. We accomplish many things but rarely feel proud of any of them. Deep work is the path to reconnecting that thread. It forces you to be selective, to let go of things that merely occupy space in your day without offering true value. It requires you to confront the initial discomfort of deep focus, because in the first few minutes, your mind will resist. It will find every reason to escape to easier activities. But if you persevere, there will be a moment when all your attention settles and only you and the task at hand remain. That moment, once experienced, will make you want to seek it out again and again. A scientist spent over 10 years researching a rare compound. For much of that time, he had nothing to publish. Many colleagues gave up, moving on to other projects, but he persevered with deep work not because he was certain of success, but because every day in the lab, he felt he was doing the right thing. When the final results arrived, a globally recognized discovery, he said the greatest reward wasn't the award itself, but the feeling of having lived those 10 years with a clear purpose. This is the essence of deep work. It transforms work into a journey, not just a means. And on that journey, every hour of deep focus becomes a brick that builds the meaning of your life. If deep work is valuable and rare, then this sense of meaning is the final, yet most powerful, reason for you to start cultivating it today. And to do that, you need not only to understand what deep work is but also to design your life so it becomes an essential part of it. That's when we move on to the first rule, the foundation of all subsequent efforts: deep work. Rule 1. Decide on your deep work philosophy. Most people say they want to work more deeply but wait until they have free time or inspiration strikes. The problem is, that moment rarely happens. The world around us is constantly full of interruptions: an urgent email, a new notification, a sudden meeting invitation. If you let deep work depend on circumstances, you'll never truly enter it. Therefore, deep work must be designed, not left to chance. It requires boundaries, rituals, and systems, things that transform focus into a part of your daily routine. Instead of a battle of willpower, you cannot wait to feel ready for deep work, just as you don't wait to feel motivated to brush your teeth. It must be a default action, triggered by a clear schedule and environment. Here, I want to introduce 4 deep work philosophies, 4 ways to organize your life and work to create space for focus. The first philosophy I call the monastic style. You eliminate or minimize surface-level obligations to the greatest extent possible, closing the door to everything that doesn't serve your core goal. This method is like how monks dedicate their lives to studying scriptures, removing all distractions. Many scientists and novelists have adopted this approach, turning their lives into a quiet fortress, opening its doors only for deep work. The second philosophy is bimodal. You divide your time into long blocks dedicated to deep work and the remainder for shallow work or social interaction. A university professor, for example, might dedicate an entire summer to deep research and then spend the academic year teaching and attending shallow work meetings. The crucial aspect here is that the deep work blocks must be long enough for you to truly immerse yourself in the problem. The third philosophy is rhythmic. You create a repeating daily or weekly routine for deep work, such as writing from 6:00 to 9:00 a.m. every day. The power of this method is that it turns deep work into a reflex. When that time comes, you automatically begin without needing to think or negotiate with yourself. And finally, the journalistic style. You leverage any available gap in your schedule to dive into deep work, much like a journalist who has to write whenever they have time, no matter where they are. This is the most difficult method, as it requires extremely fast mental state switching skills. Only those who have practiced deep focus for many years can apply it effectively. Each philosophy has its advantages and limitations, but the common thread is that you must choose a suitable approach and stick with it. If not, deep work will remain a good intention, swallowed by superficialities. Once you've chosen a suitable deep work philosophy, the next step is to build a ritual to initiate it. A ritual here isn't a luxury or elaborate ceremony, but a set of fixed rules you follow each time you begin deep work. Rituals help you avoid expending mental energy on decision-making. If every time you do deep work, you have to ask yourself how to start, where to work, what tools to use, or how long to go for, you'll deplete your willpower before you even begin. Instead, a ritual makes those questions default. An effective ritual usually answers 4 questions. First, where will you work and for how long? The deep work environment must be separated from distractions. This could be a closed room, a quiet cafe corner, or a library. The duration also needs to be fixed. For example, I will work here from 8:00 a.m. to 11 a.m. Second, how will you work when you're there? This includes preparing your tools, computer, paper and pen, documents, and setting rules to maintain focus, such as not opening email, not using your phone, or only looking up information when absolutely necessary. Third, how will you support your focus? Some people use instrumental background music, some prepare beverages like coffee or tea. These small details act as signals to your brain that deep work has begun. Fourth, how will you measure your progress? Deep work needs clear goals for each session. If in the morning you set a goal to write 1,000 words or solve 3 problems, upon completion, you'll feel like you've closed a complete loop of work instead of leaving it unfinished. One writer adopted a very simple yet effective ritual. Every morning, he would enter his study, pour a cup of black coffee, play a single piece of classical music, and then open his manuscript. Everything remained the same every day. He said that just by hearing that music, his mind automatically shifted into writing mode, as if someone had flipped a switch. Rituals don't need to be complex, but they must be consistent. It's the repetition that creates the reflex, and it's that reflex that helps you overcome initial hurdles to enter a state of deep focus. I've observed the work schedules of famous figures and realized that for them, deep work isn't an abstract concept but a disciplined structure of time. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, when needing to write a significant work, left Zurich and built himself a stone tower by Lake Bollingen. There, he had no electricity, no telephone, only his writing desk, books, and the surrounding nature. Every day he would enter the tower, working for hours in silence, cut off from the noisy rhythm of the outside world. That was an extreme monastic ritual, yet it created the conditions for him to delve deeply into his thoughts. At the other extreme, J.K. Rowling adopted a bimodal philosophy when completing the final Harry Potter book. Instead of just working at home, she rented an entire room at the Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh, where she could escape all distractions and focus absolutely. She didn't stay there indefinitely, but whenever she entered that room, she was in a world solely dedicated to her story. There are even those who choose rituals that are almost minimalist in their simplicity, yet remain powerfully effective. Bill Gates is famous for his Think Weeks. Twice a year, he retreats from Microsoft to a small lakeside cabin, solely to read, take notes, and strategize. Breakthrough Microsoft ideas, like the Internet Explorer overhaul, emerged during these periods. But deep work isn't just about how you start. It's also about how you conclude closing out your work each day. a ritual to transition from a state of focus to rest without carrying mental baggage. When you finish a deep work session, your brain is still processing unfinished problems. Without clear boundaries, you'll continue to think about them into the evening, eroding your sleep and mental energy. A work shutdown ritual can be as simple as reviewing your to-do list, updating progress, noting the next steps, and declaring to yourself that the workday is complete. This frees your brain from a state of constant vigilance, helping you recover to return tomorrow with renewed focus. I also apply this principle when writing books. Every afternoon, I always take 10 minutes to review what I've completed, cross off finished items, and write a sentence like, "Tomorrow, I'll start here." When I step away from my desk, I know I've left the work behind, allowing the evening to be entirely for family and other pleasures. A powerful ritual becomes meaningless if the surrounding environment doesn't support it. Deep work doesn't happen in a noisy space, full of agents pulling your attention elsewhere. Your environment must signal to your brain that this is a place for focus. I once visited the office of a product designer in San Francisco. Amidst a company overflowing with keyboard sounds, phone calls, and conversations, his corner was a distinct oasis. His desk faced the wall, noise-canceling headphones were always ready, and a small sign hung on his chair that read, "In deep work, please do not disturb." He said that just seeing that sign, his colleagues automatically understood and respected his focused space. Sometimes, controlling the environment also means controlling technology. Deep work cannot happen when emails, chats, and notifications are constantly popping up. Those skilled at deep work all have clear strategies to minimize digital distractions. Turning off notifications, blocking social media, or even using a separate computer solely for focused work, without installing any entertainment applications. But environment isn't just physical or technical, it's also your energy state. Deep work demands significant cognitive energy, so if you let yourself become depleted before you start, the results will be poor. That's why you should identify the times of day when your mind is sharpest and schedule deep work for those periods. For many, that's the morning. For others, it might be after exercise or during a quiet evening slot. I once tried to do deep work at the end of the day, after a barrage of meetings and emails. The result was me just staring at the screen, idly typing a few lines only to delete them. When I shifted deep work to the morning, right after waking up and having coffee, the difference was immediate. My mind was intact, not yet fragmented by small distractions, and ideas flowed like an untroubled stream. Controlling environment and energy are two sides of the same coin. If either factor is neglected, deep work becomes much more difficult. And once you have your ritual, environment, and optimal timing, the only thing left is to commit to practicing them day after day until it becomes a natural part of your life's rhythm. Deep work isn't just a skill you hone for a few weeks. It's a long-term asset that needs to be protected and maintained like a valuable resource. To do that, you must have a long-term shutdown strategy, meaning establishing boundaries and life principles that ensure deep work always has a place in your schedule, regardless of how work or circumstances change. One important strategy is learning to say no to inappropriate opportunities or requests. This sounds simple but is actually difficult, especially when they're disguised as seemingly good things, an interesting side project, a collaboration invitation, or a task praised by a superior as having potential. But if they consume your deep work time and energy without delivering commensurate value, you must decisively refuse them. Second, proactively plan for deep work on a quarterly or annual basis, not just daily. Establishing deep work seasons, longer periods rigorously protected during which you focus on one major goal. For example, an author might dedicate 3 months solely to writing a manuscript, minimizing all other tasks. This allows you to go much deeper than just doing fragmented short sessions. Third, create no-go zones in your calendar-fixed blocks of time during which you permit no meetings, calls, or shallow tasks to intrude. These no-go zones are like fortresses protecting deep work from external encroachment. And finally, always let deep work become part of your identity. When you see yourself as a deep worker, just as a writer sees writing as their breath, or a scientist sees research as their mission, then all major and minor decisions in your life will naturally gravitate towards protecting that capacity. I once heard a veteran programmer say, deep work isn't something you do when you have free time. It's the reason you create time. That statement encapsulates the spirit of this rule. If you don't actively protect deep work, the world will fill your days with tasks too shallow to make a difference. With ritual, environment, optimal timing, and a long-term strategy, deep work can become a sustainable part of your life, not only helping you complete major projects, but also shaping the person you become. From here, you are ready to move on to the next rule principle that seems paradoxical, but is key to sustaining focus. Learn to embrace boredom. Rule 2. Embrace boredom *. One autumn afternoon, I was on a train from Washington to Boston, looking out the window at the forests turning golden. Across from me, a man's eyes were glued to his phone screen, his finger constantly swiping through short news snippets. Each time a ping sounded, he'd instantly switch to another app, then return to the old page. For nearly an hour, I noticed he didn't allow his mind to wander freely for even 10 seconds. This was a microcosm of a larger problem. We've lost the ability to be alone with our thoughts, even for a few minutes. And once the brain gets used to constant stimulation, it will resist any effort to make it sit still and focus on a single thing. This is why, despite wanting to do deep work, many people find that after just a few minutes of focus, they unconsciously reach for their phone or seek something else to fill the void. To do deep work, you not only need time and space, but also the ability to remain with silence, emptiness, and even boredom. This sounds like paradoxical advice in an era where busyness and constant connection are considered the norm. But in reality, boredom is a mental workout, just like lifting weights strengthens muscles. You must train your brain to tolerate spaces without stimulation so that when focus is needed, it doesn't run off seeking an easy hit of dopamine. Don't use deep work to train your ability to focus. Instead, train your ability to focus even during non-deep work periods. This means you must practice embracing boredom as a lifestyle habit, so that when you sit down to work, your brain is ready to settle into a difficult task, rather than demanding instant gratification from the outside world. A simple practice is to schedule boredom breaks periods during the day when you intentionally do not allow yourself to seek any stimulation. No phone, no internet, no news. You simply let your mind wander or do a light activity like walking or washing dishes without adding any entertainment. Initially, the feeling will be uncomfortable, almost restless, but after just a few weeks, you'll find your brain starting to accept and even enjoy that quiet. I once spoke with a data scientist who was involved in a project analyzing massive volumes of information from billions of daily transactions. The work demanded hours of sustained focus, delving deep into complex datasets. But he confessed that initially, he couldn't sit still for more than 10 minutes without wanting to open his email or check the news. Instead of continuing to struggle in vain, he applied the principle of embrace boredom. Every day, he scheduled empty walks, 30 minutes walking around the park without his phone, without music, without deliberately thinking about work. The first week, his mind constantly tried to create stories, mentally review his to-do list, or hum a few song lyrics. But after about 2 weeks, something strange happened. His mind began to quiet down, no longer jumping around seeking stimulation. And when he returned to his desk, he found he could sit still, immersed deeply in the data for hours without feeling the urge to switch tasks. Nathan Myhrvold, former Chief Technology Officer of Microsoft, known for his rapid learning and ability to solve enormous problems, had one of his secrets: creating vacuums in his work schedule where he completely disconnected. These empty spaces weren't always for thinking about the task at hand. Sometimes, he just let his mind wander. It was this training that helped him maintain an astonishing level of focus when he truly needed to tackle work. And then there are very mundane examples, like a friend of mine, an architect. She told me that previously, whenever she waited for a client to arrive for a meeting, she would immediately pull out her phone to kill time. After reading Deep Work, she tried something different. She sat there doing nothing, just observing the space around her. Initially, it felt awkward, but after a few weeks, she realized she had the ability to maintain stillness even when entering brainstorm sessions. She wasn't compelled to speak just to fill silence, and her ideas became sharper as a result. The common thread in all these stories is that the ability to work deeply doesn't come from the moments you are working, but is forged in the moments you are not. Just as an athlete doesn't get stronger only during competition, but through hours of training and recovery, a deep worker builds their focus stamina in those seemingly unproductive moments of boredom. One of the greatest temptations that shatters deep work is the habit of quickly checking your phone or the internet. I'm not saying you have to give it up entirely, but Newport suggests transforming this behavior into a deliberate exercise rather than an unconscious reflex. This exercise is simple but demands discipline. When you feel the urge to check your phone, email, or any source of instant information, don't do it immediately. Set a fixed waiting period, perhaps 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or even an hour before allowing yourself to perform that action. During this waiting period, you continue to focus on the work at hand or simply let your mind be still. At first, the urge will be almost physical. Your heart will pound faster, your fingers will itch to grab the device, your brain will concoct all sorts of reasons like, there might be important news. But it is precisely that moment of resistance that is the real exercise. Like lifting weights, you are forcing your mental muscles to resist the pull of temptation. And each time you succeed, your self-mastery will strengthen a little. I encourage applying this principle both during and outside of work hours. If you develop the habit of delaying checking your phone while waiting in line for coffee, you'll also find it easier not to open email when you're doing deep work. Your brain learns that it doesn't need to react immediately to every stimulating signal. Another advanced technique is to schedule your internet usage instead of letting online access happen whenever you want. Designate fixed time slots during the day when you're allowed to go online, for example, 11:00 a.m. and 5:00 p.m. Outside of those slots, all searching, news checking, or social media browsing must wait. This not only helps you maintain focus, but also makes each online session more purposeful, rather than just a time-killing reflex. I tried applying this and discovered something interesting. Knowing I only had 2 internet access times a day, I started compiling a list of pages to view or things to look up. By the allowed time, I completed everything in one go instead of intermittently throughout the day. As a result, I saved hours each week and found my mind less fragmented. Embracing boredom doesn't stop at enduring it. It's the art of managing your own attention. And when you start mastering the habit of reacting to stimuli, you'll realize deep work is no longer an arduous battle, but becomes an almost pleasant, natural state. What makes embracing boredom different isn't a productivity trick, but a fundamental shift in how you view the ability to focus. Most people think focus is a natural response when work is interesting enough. In reality, it's a skill that can and must be trained. And boredom is the gymnasium for this skill. When you learn to remain in unstimulated spaces, you're teaching your brain that value doesn't lie in continuous novelty, but in the ability to delve deeply into something until its conclusion. You transition from living like someone constantly flipping channels to someone who dares to watch an entire movie, accepting even its slow parts to fully understand the story. You will never completely eliminate the urge to seek stimulation. It's part of human nature. But you can reduce its power, turning it into a choice rather than an instinct. When this happens, deep work is no longer a battle against yourself, but a flow you're ready to step into whenever needed. I realized that embracing boredom also has a miraculous side effect. It makes life less rushed. When you no longer have to fill every void with noise, you start noticing small details. The morning light falling through the window, the sound of wind rustling through the trees, an idea fleetingly occurring while waiting for water to boil. These seemingly trivial details are the pieces that nurture creative depth. And that's when you're ready for the next step. Rule 3: quit social media. If embracing boredom helps you build the foundation for focus, then quitting social media, or at least taming it, will clear away the shortcuts that pull you away from deep work. Because even if you've mastered the art of being still with boredom, if your environment is still saturated with instant escapes, your ability to focus will always be challenged. Rule 3: quit social media. I remember the first time I decided to try giving up all social media. It wasn't a grand moral declaration or a quest for spiritual purification. I simply realized I was letting the most valuable periods of my day be eroded by unconscious scrolling. In the morning, before I'd even finished my coffee, I was already checking notifications. Mid-work, a fleeting moment of restlessness, and my hand would open Facebook or Twitter for a quick break. But each time, my deep thought process was severed, and it took me dozens of minutes to get back on track. Social media is, quite literally, a machine designed to keep you on it for as long as possible. Every click, every scroll is a piece of data recorded, analyzed, and used to create more tailored content, making it even harder for you to leave. This isn't a system flaw, it is asterisk the system. The more time you spend there, the more money they make. We often only see the benefits without adequately weighing the cost. You might connect with friends, get quick news, find career opportunities. But at the same time, you're trading that for a brain that's been rewired to expect instant gratification. Instead of becoming accustomed to staying long on a difficult task, it learns to seek refreshes for an immediate dopamine hit. In the context of deep work, where profound focus is the core resource, this is an exorbitant cost. You cannot build a sturdy bridge if every few minutes you drop your hammer to play with your phone. You cannot write a good book chapter if your mind is half on the words and half on new notifications. And you certainly cannot solve a complex problem when your mind is accustomed to living in the fragmented rhythm of the newsfeed. To decide whether to keep or discard a digital tool, an artisan doesn't ask if it's useful. Instead, they ask, are the benefits of this tool significant enough to outweigh the cost to my focus and the quality of my work? This question forces you to quantify, compare, and confront the reality that many tools we keep simply because we're accustomed to having them. The artisan approach starts with a different premise than we usually think. Instead of defaulting to keeping a digital tool just because it offers some benefits, you default to eliminating it unless there's clear evidence that its benefits far outweigh the costs it imposes. This is how a skilled craftsman selects their tools. They don't buy everything simply because it might asterisk be useful for something. They only keep what truly makes a noticeable difference to the quality of their work. A photographer, who once used Instagram to share his work and connect with clients, realized when he applied the artisan approach that the number of clients genuinely acquired from Instagram was very small, while the time and focus lost were enormous. After some hesitation, he decided to close his account. The result was that he didn't lose clients. Instead, he had more time to shoot and edit photos, and the quality of his work visibly improved. To apply this method, I suggest you create a concise list of your most important professional and personal goals. Then, for each digital tool, ask, does this tool play a crucial, almost irreplaceable role in achieving this goal? If the answer is no or yes, but only at a mediocre level, you should seriously consider eliminating it. Many people object, saying, but if I quit social media, I'll miss out on news, trends, opportunities. You cannot maximize everything. Focus means choosing a select few things worth pouring all your energy into and accepting that you'll miss out on the rest. In most cases, the cost of missing out is very small compared to the cost of constant distraction. To break this cycle of dependence, Newport encourages trying a 30-day challenge, 1 month without using any social media. Afterward, you assess whether you genuinely missed anything important. Many are surprised to discover that what they lost was insignificant, while they gained a tremendous amount of time and focus. The 30-day challenge isn't simply about turning off apps or logging out of accounts. It's a period where you actively create emptiness, forcing your brain to confront the silence it previously always tried to avoid. A freelance journalist, who once believed Twitter was the lifeblood of her work, decided to participate in the challenge. For the first week, she felt cut off from the world. Waiting periods at the airport, afternoons between writing sessions all became empty. But instead of rushing to fill the void, she began to use that time to read books, jot down ideas, or simply observe her surroundings. After just 2 weeks, she realized that most of the news she thought she could only get from Twitter still reached her through other channels: email, friends, or traditional newspapers. When the 30 days were up, she didn't revert to her old habits. Twitter was no longer a lifeline, but merely a tool she opened a few times a month when truly necessary. This challenge also exposes an uncomfortable truth. Many people keep social media not for the benefits it brings, but because they fear the feeling of emptiness when they don't have it. Like someone accustomed to morning coffee, they don't drink it for the taste, but for fear of a caffeine withdrawal headache. The success of the 30-day challenge isn't measured by whether you return to social media, but by whether you can make a clear-headed decision based on a realistic analysis of pros and cons, rather than on the fear of missing out. Only after going through this detox period do you gain enough distance to clearly see how the tool affects your focus and the quality of your work. After completing the 30-day challenge, the next step isn't to go back to everything as it was, but to establish clear usage rules. The difference here is that you don't let digital tools automatically intrude into every empty slot in your day. Instead, you predefine the specific purpose, specific time, and specific manner for using them. If a tool doesn't serve an important goal or your purpose for using it is too vague, it will no longer have a place in your schedule. For example, a Professor Newport knows still maintains a LinkedIn account but only logs in on Monday mornings, limiting his time to a maximum of 30 minutes to reply to messages and make new connections. For the rest of the week, he doesn't touch it. As a result, he still maintains his professional network, but doesn't allow it to interfere with his extended deep work sessions. This principle can be applied even to those who decide to keep social media. For instance, you might decree that Facebook can only be opened on Friday evenings to catch up with friends and events, or Instagram only for posting photos once a week. The difference lies in knowing precisely why you're entering the app and when you'll leave. Without these rules, you'll quickly slide back into old habits. Social media platforms are never static. They're constantly optimized to keep you engaged longer. So each time you open them without a clear purpose, you're handing over control of your time and attention to a system designed to exploit it. Your focus is like a precious garden. If you open its gates to anyone anytime, don't be surprised when one day you step out and find it full of weeds. Social media platforms are those weed seeds. Tiny, seemingly harmless, but if left unchecked, they will quickly consume all the space for the plants you truly want to grow. Quitting or limiting social media isn't an extreme act. It's a strategy to preserve your most valuable resource: focus. If deep work is what helps you create exceptional value, then anything that constantly breaks it must be evaluated as a threat, even if it's something everyone around you considers normal. You don't need to wait until your focus completely collapses before acting. Just as a professional athlete avoids habits detrimental to their physical strength, someone who wants to become a craftsman of intellect must protect their brain from subtle addictive mechanisms. Choose digital tools like a designer selects materials for a masterpiece. Keep only what, after weighing the pros and cons, you find its value far outweighs its cost. And always remember that your attention is not infinite. Every time you give it to a newsfeed, you're draining energy that could otherwise be dedicated to your most profound creative work. Once you've learned to tame or eliminate social media, you'll notice a subtle change. Quiet periods no longer bother you. You start having more continuous work sessions, fewer feelings of interruption, and your mind has enough space to nurture big ideas. That's also when you're ready for another challenge, not with clearly addictive things, but with things that seem harmless, yet silently erode your ability to focus. I once thought I worked hard. My calendar was packed with meetings. Emails constantly poured in, and I always replied as quickly as possible. The workday would end, and I'd be exhausted, but when I looked back, I saw an uncomfortable truth. Very little of it created real value. That is the nature of shallow, work-easy tasks that don't require deep concentration. They can be done in a distracted state, writing a few email lines, updating a report, attending a meeting to stay informed, replying to messages. Each task individually seems harmless, even necessary, but accumulated, they consume almost all of your time and energy. You can enter shallow work easily but will never swim far. There, you're always busy but never create anything groundbreaking. And the greatest danger is that if you don't realize this, you'll mistake it for real work because it gives you an instant feeling of productivity. An empty inbox, a checked-off checklist. A renowned professor at the university where I work only works 40 hours a week, but almost all of it is deep work: research, writing books, in-depth teaching. All emails, paperwork, and trivial requests are handled in short, fixed time slots. As a result, while many colleagues work late into the night yet publish nothing significant, he consistently produces impactful work. The lesson is clear. If you don't actively drain the shallow water, it will overflow and fill all the space for deep work. And because shallow work never disappears on its own, you must create boundaries not just to protect your time, but to protect your mental energy, the very thing that helps you delve to the core of problems. the first step to draining the shallow water is to measure it. Look at each task on your work calendar and ask yourself, if I assign this task to an average skilled final year student, could they complete it well while listening to music and browsing the internet? If the answer is yes, it's shallow work. Once categorized, you need to limit it with specific numbers. Instead of letting shallow work occupy any empty space, restrict it to a certain percentage, 20% or 30% of your total work time. The rest must be strictly reserved for deep work. I applied this principle by setting a time budget for email and administrative tasks, a maximum of 90 minutes per day, divided into two 45-minute slots in the morning and afternoon. Any request that couldn't be handled within this limit will wait until the next day. Another strategy is backward scheduling. Fixed schedule productivity. You clearly define your end-of-workday time and then schedule backward to allocate deep and shallow work. This method forces you to cut out unnecessary shallow tasks because there's no longer flexible time for them to creep in. I experimented with this while completing a book manuscript. Previously, I often left my schedule open, and the consequence was that deep work was always pushed back, crammed into the end of the day. But when I rigidly set my work end time at 5 p.m., I was forced to prioritize writing in the morning and consolidate all emails, meetings, and exchanges into short blocks in the afternoon. After just 1 month, the speed and quality of my manuscript significantly improved. Shallow work isn't entirely bad. It's necessary for operations and maintaining connections. The problem is that if left unlimited, it will multiply infinitely because the modern world always has another email, another notification, another new request. You must be the one to set limits if you don't want to be caught in a busy but hollow spiral. Once you've measured and limited shallow work, the next challenge is to learn to say no, or at least not right now, to these kinds of requests. The difficulty here is that shallow work often masquerades as opportunities or urgent tasks, making you feel guilty if you refuse. First, the default to silence method. If a request comes via email and isn't clearly important or urgent, you don't respond immediately. Most of these things will either disappear on their own or be handled by someone else. This intentional silence helps you avoid becoming the person who shoulders every trivial task just because you're always available to reply. Second, standardized refusal templates. Prepare a few polite but firm responses to decline or delay. For example, I apologize, but this week I'm fully focused on Project A, so I can't take on any new tasks. If it's still needed, we can revisit it next month. This answer both demonstrates reasonable busyness and prevents others from feeling ignored. Third, automate or delegate. Much shallow work doesn't necessarily need to be done by you directly. Leverage tools, processes, or delegate to others. One CEO saves hours each week simply by setting up a virtual assistant to reply to client emails based on a set of template answers. A memorable point in this story is about a scientist who won a prestigious award by applying the no administrative hours for shallow work principle. He required all meetings to be scheduled at least a week in advance and only take place on a fixed afternoon. All emails were handled at the end of the day, after deep work was done. Thanks to that, he protected long, continuous mornings for focused research, where important discoveries often emerged. Saying no to shallow work is saying yes to deep work. Every refusal is a protective barrier, preventing your deep waters from being encroached upon by small but persistent waves. One of the most powerful ways to drain the shallow water is to design your work schedule around deep work, rather than trying to squeeze deep work into the gaps. This may seem obvious, but most people do the opposite. They leave their calendar open, then fill it with emails, meetings, and trivial tasks, only then trying to find space for important work. A creative director in software design, at the beginning of each week, opens her calendar and blocks out 3 to 4 consecutive slots for deep work, treating them as uncancelable meetings. All other request team meetings, client exchanges, paperwork must revolve around those time slots. The result is that her major projects always progress steadily, while most colleagues are still struggling to clear their paths before even starting the main work. A writer schedules writing every morning from 8:00 a.m. to 11 a.m., regardless of how many emails or other requests there are that day. The rest of the day can be for shallow work, but the morning, when the brain functions best, is sacrosanct. Thanks to this principle, he consistently publishes one book a year, while many other authors take 5 to 7 years for a single project. Another technique is to set a hard end-of-day limit. If you know you must leave your desk at 5 p.m., you'll automatically prioritize deep work. Conversely, if you believe you can work later into the evening, shallow work will creep in throughout the day, and deep work will be pushed back indefinitely. You cannot spontaneously find time for deep work in this distracted world. That time must be protected by sturdy barriers, locked calendar slots, hard end-of-day rules, a time budget for email, fixed deep work blocks. All these are not to restrict you, but to liberate you from the pull of easy but meaningless tasks. If the previous rules were like a knife cutting away obvious sources of distraction, then draining the shallow water is the art of keeping that cut from ever healing. Because shallow work doesn't disappear just because you once eliminated it. It will return like rainwater seeping through cracks. For deep work to become a sustainable habit, you need 2 elements: awareness and structure. Awareness helps you recognize when you're drifting into shallow waters. Structure provides you with a system to pull yourself out, a locked work calendar, hard end-of-day rules, a time budget for email, fixed deep work blocks. All these are not to constrain you, but to free you from the allure of easy but meaningless tasks. A young entrepreneur once struggled with an enormous workload. Previously, he thought the solution was to work more, stay up later. But when he applied the drain the shallow water principle, he realized he only needed to focus on a few core value-generating activities and make everything else ancillary or eliminate it entirely. His company's revenue increased, but his working hours decreased. Deep work cannot exist if the shallow water isn't controlled. Just as an old forest needs sunlight for young trees to grow, deep work needs ample space you only get when you dare to drain the superficial activities. Once you've mastered all 4 rules working deeply, embracing boredom, quitting social media, and draining the shallow water, you'll realize you possess an advantage that much of the modern world has lost: the ability to sit down, focus, and create things that truly matter. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey of discovering deep work. If you've come this far, it means you've allowed these ideas the chance to challenge how you live and work. That's not an easy thing to do. In a noisy and hurried world, choosing to listen and reflect deeply is already a rare and courageous act. I want to hear from you. Tell me where this book resonated with you. What changes has it made you want to try? Or what new questions has it sparked for you? A comment or review from you not only helps me understand the book's impact, but also helps others, who are still searching, know that there's a path worth exploring here. And if there's another book you're eager to discover together, a work you believe will challenge or uplift some aspect of our spiritual lives, please let me know. The world of books is vast, and your choice might open up a new journey where neither you nor I know what we'll find until we reach our destination. Because ultimately, every deep conversation begins with an invitation. Today, I've extended that invitation to you through the pages of Deep Work. Now, I await your invitation to another book.